Hello, this is Phil Tomzak, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the May 8th issue of the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. And let's start with some front page news. With the headline, a Star exclusive, Toronto MPP jumps into Ontario Liberal leadership race. And this comes from Rob Ferguson in the Star's Queen's Park Bureau. She's been a hospital president and played on Canada's 1998 World Cup rugby team. Now, first-term MPP Lee Fairclough is setting her sights on leading Ontario's Liberal Party. When Fairclough, from Etobicoke Lakeshore, officially registers Friday, she will become the first member of the legislature in the November 21st race to replace Bonnie Crombie, who resigned in January. Having a voice at Queen's Park is crucial after the last two leaders failed in that regard, putting the third-place party at a disadvantage in efforts to hold Premier Doug Ford to account, Fairclough told the Star. It has been 8 years since the Liberals have had a leader with a seat in the legislature, the married mother of two teenage boys said in a wide-ranging interview. Indeed, the last time that happened was when Kathleen Wynne was premier for 5 years, ending in 2018. I've heard from many Liberals that this is important to them this time. It's not the only thing, but it's the combination of that and having leadership experiences and the ability to connect with people, added Fairclough, who defeated one of Ford's MPPs in last year's election as his Progressive Conservatives cruised to a third majority. She is the second candidate in the race that requires signatures from at least 250 party members and a $150,000 entry fee paid in installments. Policy advisor Dylan Mirando entered on April 22nd. A medical radiation therapist who treated cancer patients for 3 years before returning to school for a master's degree in health administration from the University of Toronto, Fairclough went on to hold a variety of positions in the healthcare sector. It's grounding to have had that time. I can still see the faces of the patients that I cared for, she said. It reminds me what's important. Fairclough became the president of St. Mary's General Hospital in Kitchener in 2020 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and served as senior vice president of clinical care at Toronto's Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, Canada's largest mental health teaching hospital. Fairclough is touting that mix of experience on the front lines and in the executive suite, along with helping her 8th-ranked rugby squad finish 4th at the World Cup in Amsterdam after an upset win over France. Partisan politics is a team sport, said Fairclough, who was raised in Southampton on the shores of Lake Huron and counts former Liberal cabinet minister Murray Elston, her MPP as a child, as a backer, along with former Health Minister Deb Matthews and MPPs Ted Sue and Lucille Collard. We need a leader right now who knows how to be a team player and knows how to lead teams. That will be the root of how we rebuild as Liberals again. Fairclough has been traveling the province, talking to party members as part of her bid, and hosted a hospitality suite at the recent federal Liberal convention in Montreal. Only candidates who have officially only candidates who have officially registered for the race can begin raising money from donors toward a spending limit of $1 million. Others considering runs for the leadership include Liberal MPP Rob Surjanic from Ajax, Liberal MP Nate Erskine-Smith from Beaches, East York, and former federal minister Navdeep Bains, who recently resigned as a senior Rogers communication executive. Friday is his last day in the post. Leadership hopefuls have until July 31st to enter the race and can sign up new party members until September 7th, with an exception for campus Liberal clubs, which have until September 25th. Voting takes place online from November 9th through 20th by ranked ballot, with the winner to be announced the next day. Let's move on to our next story from news from the GTA, and the headline is, "A couple asked me to keep silent about Night Liberty Village filmmakers was killed upstairs, roommate tells the murder trial. And this comes from Jacques Gallant, Courts and Justice reporter. A couple on trial in the killing of their neighbor in his Liberty Village condo urged their roommate not to talk to the police and to lie if necessary, the woman testified this week. Lin Hua is the Crown's key witness at the trial of husband and wife Koa Tran and Isabel Nguyen. Tran, 36, is charged with second-degree murder in the June 2023 killing of 54-year-old filmmaker Riaz Habib, who lived directly above the couple and had been complaining about the smoke emanating from their balcony barbecue. Nguyen, 30, is charged with accessory after the fact and committing an indignity to a dead body after Habib's body was found wrapped in blankets and towels in the garbage compactor of the Western Battery Road condo complex. Isabel and Koa asked me to keep silent if the police asked me anything, said Hua, who began testifying Wednesday morning. Hua, who described Nguyen as her best friend, had been living with the couple since May 2023 after arriving in Canada as an international student from Vietnam. She awoke in the early morning hours of June 6, 2023, to the sound of loud footsteps upstairs, which she thought could have been one person chasing another. She said she also heard furniture being dragged, a window being opened, and a man yelling, "Help, help, help." While she normally slept on a mattress in the living room, that night she was sleeping in the couple's bedroom with Nguyen, who has asked Hua to join her because she said Tran would be working in the living room. Hua asked Nguyen about the noise. She told me to just go back to sleep because maybe the director, the neighbor upstairs, he was filming something, Hua testified. She said she didn't see Tran until later that morning when she saw him in the living room. 3 days later, police were in the neighborhood to investigate after Habib had been reported missing. They went to the couple's home, where Nguyen is seen on police body-worn camera footage, expressing surprise that Habib is missing, telling officers she believes she saw him just a few days earlier, but that she and Tran only know him enough to say hi. At some point after the police's visit, Hua told the jury that Tran asked her for a favor. If the police asked, she should say the three of them had been sleeping together in the bedroom on June 6th. "I agreed. I have no choice," said Hua, who confirmed under questioning by Crown Attorney Anna Tenhouse that she had no other friends or family in Canada at the time. But she said she began to feel uncomfortable and moved out by the end of June 2023 after her boss at the restaurant where she worked offered her a temporary place to stay. The prosecution's narrative of the killing of Riaz Habib. The Crown has alleged that tension had been brewing for weeks between the couple and Habib over the smoke from their balcony barbecue. Tran had agreed to start texting Habib when he was about to barbecue. Hua recalled one instance where the two men spoke in person, and Habib appeared to be angry. He said something to Koa, and then the neighbor slammed the door and he went upstairs, she told the jury. She testified that all she knew about Habib came from Tran and Nguyen, that he looked sad and he lived alone. Tran was arrested in July 2023, and Nguyen began repeatedly urging Hua over Facebook Messenger not to say anything to the police. Nguyen claimed this was based on advice from a lawyer. Tenhouse told the jury that the lawyer was neither Liam O'Connor, representing Tran at trial, nor Nguyen's lawyer, Tyler Smith. "Don't say what happened that night. Don't say what happened the morning after," Nguyen said in one message in Vietnamese. "Just keep silent." Hua testified she understood that to mean she shouldn't say she heard any noises upstairs or that she saw Tran in the living room the next morning. "Please promise me not to talk to anybody about Koa's case. You must stay silent and request to speak to a lawyer first," Nguyen said in another message. "I repeat that over and over again because that's the only way you can protect yourself." It was unclear to Hua what Tran had been arrested for in July 2023, but she said Nguyen told her they had arrested the wrong person. She testified she was scared at the time because Habib had been found dead and the murderer may still be around and they can just kill people by chance. In other messages, Nguyen told Hua that the police had threatened her, that they play tricks on people and manipulate others psychologically in order to get people to say anything. She asked Hua that if the police ever called her, she should record it for Nguyen. Hua told her she wouldn't say anything, fearing she would get into trouble. The best thing is not to get involved in it, Nguyen wrote. Hua ended up speaking with police in July 2023 after they called her. The jury has heard that Tran was ultimately charged with murder in November 2023, and Nguyen was charged the following May. A pathologist is expected to testify that it was difficult to determine a cause of death as Habib's body had begun to decompose, but that he noted a number of pre-death and post-death injuries. Let's move on to our next front page story. And this is a Star investigation. It has the headline, "He oversaw development approvals in Markham." Now, this former official is accused of pocketing more than $140,000 from a developer. And this comes from Sheila Wang, investigative reporter. The city of Markham is investigating allegations that a senior official who oversaw development approvals was also collecting payments from a developer with a zoning matter before council. According to a complaint filed with the city, former Commissioner of Development Services Arvind Prasad invoiced more than $140,000 for consulting work to Grit Developments between December 2023 and March 2025. During that time, Prasad endorsed a zoning request to allow the same developer to build an industrial complex on agricultural land that includes a historic farmhouse that had been designated a heritage building. The city of Markham is concerned by the allegations, city spokesperson Brian Fua said in a statement. He said the city will take appropriate action as necessary, but declined to comment on workplace matters or internal investigations due to privacy and confidentiality considerations. Through a lawyer, the former Markham commissioner denied any wrongdoing and declined to provide further comment. Prasad left the city of Markham in June 2025 to become the general manager for planning and economic development with the city of Hamilton. In a statement, Grit Developments said due to the ongoing actions, it would not comment on the consulting business that allegedly invoiced the developer and directed the questions to Prasad. Grit Developments denies all allegations of wrongdoing regarding its zoning application. Parathiban Rajendran, Grit's director, said, "It is Grit's position that the final decision was solely and properly made by council, following the usual staff review and statutory public process." The complaint was filed with Markham in August by Toronto businessman Prasanna Balachandran, who has also provided the city with 9 invoices allegedly between Prasad and the developer. Balachandran said he came into possession of the documents as part of his research for his business disputes and felt compelled to share them with the city. "It's at the expense of general public trust," he said in an interview with The Star. "It's brazen on one front. It's comical in the sense that people do this in such a brazen manner." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Let's move on to the next news article. News from Canada. 3 Canadians connected to the hantavirus cruise isolating in Ontario and Quebec. What experts say about the transmission risk. This comes from Daisha Lapi, staff reporter for The Star. 3 Canadians with ties to the cruise ship struck by a deadly hantavirus outbreak in the Atlantic Ocean are isolating at home in Ontario and Quebec, the federal government said Thursday. Nearly 2 weeks ago, 2 Canadians disembarked in St. Helena and shared a flight with a third Canadian who was not on the ship, the MV Hondius. It's possible that transmission is no longer contained to just the ship and could spread further. But officials say it's not the cusp of a pandemic. Ontario Health Minister Sylvia Jones confirmed during a press conference earlier in the day that the two people who left the cruise ship are from Ontario. They have returned to Ontario and are isolating. The minister said it is believed the individuals are not a transmission risk, but the situation is fluid and will continue to be monitored. Jones said public health officials are monitoring the passengers on a daily basis to make sure they are isolating. The incubation and monitoring period will likely be around 30 days. According to a statement posted online by Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand, all three are asymptomatic, but the Canadian who is isolating in Quebec may have come into contact with a symptomatic individual and is among those being monitored by local authorities. Anand says Ottawa is sending consular officials to support Canadians on the ship. On Sunday, the Dutch ship, operated by Oceanwide Expeditions, asked local authorities for help due to a health emergency as it journeyed to Cape Verde off the coast of West Africa. Oceanwide Expeditions, the ship's operator, said Thursday that a total of 30 passengers, including 2 infected who are deceased, left the vessel at St. Helena. About 150 passengers remain on board, including 4 Canadians. A Dutch flight attendant on a plane briefly boarded by an infected cruise passenger in South Africa, one of the individuals who later died, was showing symptoms of hantavirus and would be tested, said the Dutch Health Ministry. Other countries are also monitoring those who exited the ship. Singaporean health authorities said they were monitoring 2 men who got off at St. Helena. South African authorities are doing contact tracing from an April 25th flight. The World Health Organization says 8 hantavirus cases, identified as the Andes strain, have been reported following the outbreak, including 3 deaths. Here's what we know about the virus's potential to spread. Could the spread of hantavirus escalate into a pandemic? The WHO says the hantavirus outbreak is not the start of a pandemic. Matthew Miller, the director of Michael G. DeGroat Institute for Infectious Disease Research at McMaster University, said it's important to consider how well the virus transmits itself first. Historically, the virus doesn't spread a lot because only one strain, Andes, is transmissible from person to person, and that strain, Miller said, also isn't so good at transmission, especially when compared to other viruses like influenza or COVID-19. He said the situation on the ship is showing that. Things like conjunctivitis can spread through environments like cruise ships really rapidly, said Miller. Here, although we're talking about a bit of an exotic and unusually dangerous virus, the overall number of cases has remained very limited, even in a setting that lends itself to large outbreaks. If the transmission rate remains stable, Miller said that's reassuring. He said that doesn't mean people that have been in contact with infected individuals on that ship shouldn't be concerned. Containing the spread through quarantine can be challenging, however, because the hantavirus incubation period, the time between exposure and the onset of symptoms, can be long, ranging from 1 to 8 weeks. The incubation periods for other viruses, like the flu and COVID-19, are much shorter. There aren't approved vaccines for a hantavirus right now. That's a concern, but I would say that at the moment, the risk of a pandemic from this particular outbreak remains low. What we're still learning about hantavirus. A briefing published by Canada's National Collaborating Centre for Disease Control showed that from 1993 to January 2020, 143 cases of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome were confirmed in the country through laboratory testing, with 73 of those cases in Alberta. The briefing estimated that annually there is an average of about 4 to 5 new cases of the virus in Canada. Since January 1st, 2020, the Public Health Agency of Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory has confirmed 26 cases of HPS. There are no approved vaccines or therapeutics for New World antiviruses we have in Canada and North America, said Bryson Warner, a research scientist at the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, or VIDO. Groups globally and in Canada, like at VIDO, are working on potential vaccines, he said. Some have gone through early clinical trials, but nothing has made it to the full approval stage. There are challenges. The viruses themselves are sometimes tricky to work with, he said. It's difficult to get a virus's genetic instructions to successfully produce its proteins in a lab setting in order to work toward a vaccine. There also aren't enough cases of hantavirus to run a large clinical trial to get really good data on how effective a vaccine is, much different from the scenario during COVID-19, where thousands were infected in short amounts of time. It's an important area of research, said Warner, but it's understudied. The fieldwork is difficult, and it's very difficult to study antiviruses in the lab because they require high containment labs. Let's move on now to an opinion piece. And this has the headline, I went home to the heartland of Alberta independence. Even after covering Donald Trump for 10 years, I was still terrified by what I found. And this is submitted by the Star's senior opinion writer, Richard Warnica. With the byline, the location Edmonton, Calgary, Mossleigh, and Lethbridge. I had known Mitch Silvestri, the architect of the Alberta independence movement, for less than 5 minutes when he first implied King Charles might have him killed. It was late February. We were in a loud coffee shop near the Alberta legislature. He kept mouthing the words, the king, but he wouldn't say them out loud. I don't want to get shot, he said, then whispered them again, enunciating this time, barely audible, the king. The king, I replied. Yes, he said, it will be the end of my days. Excuse me, at that point I still assumed Silvestri must be joking. He is, after all, a serious political player in Alberta. It's not just that he's leading the campaign to have his province break away from Canada. He's also deeply enmeshed in the ruling United Conservative Party, or UCP. So I played along. You think the king is going to come for you? I asked, laughing. He let out an exaggerated no while nodding vigorously. I saw him when he was in Ottawa, I said. I don't think he knows his way around a rifle. Silvestri moaned. That's not even funny, he said. That's not funny at all. I spent a week in Alberta recently, following Silvestri around and speaking to separatist supporters, opposition leaders, economists, pollsters, and more. I wanted to understand how Alberta independence, a movement long relegated to the kookiest fringes of the far right, had become so real so fast. It's a personal issue for me. I was born in Edmonton. I grew up in Calgary. Most of my family and some of my closest friends still live in the province. If, as seems increasingly likely, Albertans vote on independence this fall, they will be voting on my right to keep going home without a passport. What I found on my trip and in weeks of reporting both before and after shocked me. Make no mistake, Silvestri and the movement he's helping lead are deadly serious. They can pack rooms in tiny hamlets and big cities. More importantly, they have become perhaps the most influential faction inside the UCP. They are also dangerously detached from reality. I saw Silvestri speak in person, both in our interview and at events across the province, for more than 5 hours combined. I later reviewed hours more footage and transcripts from other speeches and interviews he gave as he barnstormed across Alberta, making the case for independence. An astonishing number of the stories he told at every stop were either exaggerated, distorted, or outright false. Silvestri seems to truly suspect, to cite one example, that King Charles has both the capacity and the interest in having him killed. He thinks oil spills help trees grow, that Canada has the highest taxes in the world. I saw him tell one crowd in Mossleigh, Alberta, that he thinks there are Chinese communist soldiers in Canada, in part because he saw 6 Asian men in West Edmonton Mall wearing new coats. In another era of Canadian politics, Silvestri's devotion to far-right memes, conspiracies, and outright disinformation would be disqualifying. But here's the thing. In Alberta, right now, it's working. On Monday, Silvestri hand-delivered more than 300,000 signatures to election officials in Edmonton, far surpassing the 178,000 he needed to get a referendum on the ballot. That's what makes Silvestri perhaps the most important person in Canadian politics right now. He's trying to break up the country. His name is literally atop on the independence petition, and he has at least the tacit and quite likely the active support of significant parts of the Alberta government. I'm also not 100% convinced he's going to lose. From Jason Kenney, be careful what you ask for. Silvestri is a tall man and almost completely bald. He owns a sporting goods store in Bonnyville, a small town northeast of Edmonton, and usually dresses like a high school basketball coach on banquet day. On stage, he speaks in declarative fragments. He booms, pacing back and forth, bouncing from conspiracy to conspiracy. He also seems to be constantly moving the lower half of his mouth, up and down, side to side, in little half loops, like an actor doing warm-ups or someone who has just been punched in the jaw. I spent weeks exhaustively fact-checking Silvestri. I have no qualms saying his speeches and interviews are packed with near ceaseless errors of fact and interpretation. At the same time, I don't believe he is deliberately lying about anything. I think Silvestri generally thinks the pitch he's making for independence is both factual and righteous. You can nitpick a point here, a point there, he said in one of our talks, but the general premise is absolutely credible. In Silvestri's mind, the federal government has been undermining Alberta since the moment the province entered Confederation in 1905. He and other separatists, and quite a few federalists, believe that an eastern elite concentrated in Ontario and Quebec have consistently stifled Alberta's energy industry, that the federal equalization formula is biased against Albertans, and that the structures of federal power are so tilted toward the center that Albertans will never receive a fair shake. An independent Alberta, Silvestri believes, would be richer and more free. It would also have lower taxes, fewer regulations, fewer immigrants, and more Alberta-born children. Our Constitution, it says that you're going to have to be born in Alberta to become a citizen, he told the crowd at one event I attended. So we're going to have to get those girls making more babies. It's a pitch thousands of Albertans have signed on for, and one I saw hundreds of people eagerly swallow at events across the province earlier this year. But Silvestri didn't always feel this way about the rest of Canada. In fact, he told me as we drank our coffees that he was never political before 2020. What changed? COVID, he said. They shut me down, and Canadian Tire and Walmart stayed open. That's what did it. Silvestri blames former Alberta Premier Jason Kenney for temporarily closing Silvestri Sporting Goods, which sells mostly guns and fishing gear, during the pandemic. He joined the UCP shortly afterwards with the explicit goal of driving Kennedy out of office and, later, installing Danielle Smith in his place. To this day, Silvestri remains one of the UCP's most important organizers. As such, he believes Smith has no choice but to indulge the separatists in her party. He may be right. A recent poll pegged support for independence at 55% among UCP voters. As premier, Smith has certainly gone to extraordinary lengths to clear the separatists' path. She lowered the number of signatures required to get a referendum on the ballot. She killed off one court challenge brought by Alberta First Nations and had her government intervene in another. She has, critics say, delayed the efforts of a rival pro-Canada group to get their own petition on the ballot. I really don't know what her own views are, said Paula Simons, who spent decades as an influential journalist in Edmonton before becoming an independent Alberta senator. I don't think anybody else does either, but in order to stay in power, she knows in her RNA that requires placating the most radical elements of her own party. What those radical elements want is clear: independence. Between January and late April, Silvestri and his allies circulated a petition that sought to put these questions to voters. Do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state? On Monday, Silvestri dropped off dozens of bankers' boxes stuffed with signed petitions to a loading dock at Elections Alberta headquarters in Edmonton. Outside, he addressed scores of cheering supporters, waving Alberta's blue and yellow flag. So the updated tally is 301,620, he said. Now we're in the Stanley Cup final. If those tallies are verified by elections officials, and if they aren't stopped by a court challenge, many believe Smith will schedule the referendum for October, when the province is already set to vote on 9 other items related to immigration and provincial autonomy. What happens after that is anyone's guess. Committed support for separatism in Alberta remains relatively flat, but some pollsters, not all of them, suggest it is growing. In March, Pollara released a survey that found that 27% of decided Albertans would vote to separate, the highest such number in 5 years. A significantly higher number of Albertans, meanwhile, may be willing to vote for independence just to create leverage with Ottawa, according to many pollsters and political insiders I spoke to. I get contacted by smart, sophisticated, usually oil patch-related people almost every day that tell me that I'm a complete idiot because I don't understand negotiating, said former Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. My message to the frustrated Federalists who want leverage is, be careful what you ask for. Those numbers still suggest the Separatists would very likely lose a referendum if it were held today. But a lot can happen between now and next fall. Campaigns can take on a life of their own, said Dave Cournoyer, a longtime Alberta political analyst. A year before the Brexit vote, some polls had Remain up by 20 points. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Let's move on now to the world of sports. We do have an opinion piece in the Toronto Maple Leafs news, and the headline is, "The hockey world is up in arms about John Chayka. The new Leafs GM has a believer in Matt Sundin." And this comes from sports columnist Dave Feshuk. It's not like no one saw this coming. The hockey world is up in arms that the Maple Leafs hired John Chayka as their 19th general manager, and Keith Pelley, the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment CEO, finds himself out on a limb, and not for the first time. Pelley took some knocks for firing Masai Ujiri as Raptors president last summer in what was widely seen as a cost-cutting move. So there was some irony in Pelley prefacing Chayka's introduction Monday with an homage to the Raptors, Toronto's sporting feel-good story of the spring, for playing with tremendous heart. That's still very much Ujiri's team, of course, and the younger, cheaper executive Pelley put in charge, Bobby Webster, has yet to demonstrate the acumen required to move it forward. Webster, mind you, doesn't come with even an ounce of the baggage lugged into town by Chayka, the Niagara-based 36-year-old who's been out of hockey for more than a half-decade after he was run out of Arizona and suspended by the NHL for a year for conduct detrimental to the league. For all that, the ever-optimistic Pelley seems convinced he has hired a brilliant mind who amounts to hockey's answer to Theo Epstein. Just as Epstein was the analytics-driven general manager, hired at 28, who delivered a World Series to Boston that broke an 86-year championship drought, the idea is Chayka will be the architect who ends the longest Stanley Cup drought in history, which will hit 60 years next spring. The industry backlash has been loud. Some of that, Chayka said Monday, comes down to the way he did business after he arrived at age 26 as the youngest GM in pro sports history. Maybe I didn't value relationships as much as I should have in the human connection side of things, said Chayka in a scrum with reporters, insisting he has evolved in the decades since. Speaking later in an interview with the Star in the Maple Leafs dressing room, Chayka spoke of another factor in the pushback to his arrival: the lingering skepticism in some hockey corners about executives who cast themselves as data-driven analytics types. It was Pelly's stated preference from the outset of the GM search, and the eye test crowd has raised eyebrows. These are multi-million-dollar decisions, and some people want you to make them on emotion or just how you feel, Chayka said. Using data and technology is a way in which you can try to mine a competitive advantage. I think that's what most top organizations are trying to do. It's not because they love numbers. It's not that it's more fun to talk about than numbers. Wedged into this mix is Mats Sundin, the last captain to lead the franchise past the second round of the playoffs in 2002, who is moving his family from Stockholm to serve in an advisory role. Among the things he said he'll miss about Sweden, his regular Friday shinny game featuring a list of ex-NHLers. "I'm looking for a game here," said Sundin, who's 55. His love of the Maple Leafs and his belief in Chayka, he said, were among the factors that spurred the move with his wife and 3 children. "I think people believe Chayka is data-driven only, but no, Sundin said. You know general manager stands for general, and he covers the whole spectrum. People are unfairly saying he's been out of the game for a long time. I know he's watched every NHL game, followed the players, knows the agents, the general managers. He's very updated on what's going on in hockey today." Sundin and Chayka spoke separately while sitting in front of a wall in the Leafs Players Lounge, emblazoned with the franchise's latest dressing room mantra: "No grit, no grind, no greatness." The only thing missing, for the purposes of clarity, was a top line: "In this dressing room resides." One thing Chayka and his 28th place Leafs have in common: they have recently had their character called into question. "I'm sure there's a lot of great pieces here, and I'm sure there's something that's maybe is missing," Sundin said of Toronto's roster. "Not so much is missing that this team can't be back in the playoffs next season," Chayka said. "Pelly, after all, hired him to run a retool, which will be aided by whoever the Leafs decide to pick first overall next month after winning Tuesday night's NHL draft lottery. I believe making the 2027 playoffs is realistic, yeah," Chayka said. "I don't have a crystal ball, of course, but I think that there's some of the best players in the world that play for this team, and those are tough pieces to find. Even if a team led by Austin Matthews and William Nylander can get back to the playoffs, there are those who would question the point of the trip. 9 postseasons of disappointment piled up in the Shanaplan era for a reason. The way teams win in the playoffs, there is a formula for it," Chayka said, and obviously the way the team was constructed didn't solve for that. Now it's time to do some difficult math. If the solution is not in the dressing room, Chayka can hope it's in the data. And we have another sports story in the world of soccer. Canada's World Cup hopes take a hit as captain Alphonso Davies is injured 5 weeks before the opener. And this is a special to the Star written by Joe Callahan. Canada's World Cup hopes have been rocked after Alphonso Davies' wretched injury run took another turn, with news that the national team captain suffered a fresh hamstring issue while playing for Bayern Munich on Wednesday night. Davies, who hasn't played for the national team in well over a year after suffering a torn ACL in a clash with the USA in March 2025, has been blighted by injuries throughout 2026. Head coach Jesse Marsch may have thought the worst was over as Davies returned to action throughout April and looked to be ramping things up for his club side. However, Munich announced a free and potentially seismic setback Friday morning with the news that the 25-year-old had suffered a new injury, having come off the bench as a second-half substitute in this week's Champions League clash with PSG. Alphonso Davies suffered a muscle injury in his left hamstring during Wednesday's Champions League semifinal second leg against Paris Saint-Germain as confirmed by an examination by the FC Bayern medical unit. The Canada international will therefore be out of action for several weeks, the German Giants said in a statement Friday morning. With Canada's men's World Cup opener against Bosnia and Herzegovina now just 5 short weeks away, the captain is facing a race against time for that historic June 12th date at BMO Field. The nature of this fresh injury, coming after a litany of muscle injuries this season, also casts significant doubt on Davies' ability to potentially play in all 3 group games across 12 days. Should Canada achieve historic progress from its group, the recovery time between games could shorten further still. We are in close contact with Alfonso and remain in touch with Bayern's medical team following his recent setback, Canada Soccer said in a statement. Our focus is on supporting his recovery and providing every available resource, including specialized soft tissue expertise, to give him the best possible pathway back to full fitness ahead of the FIFA World Cup. The ACL injury suffered by Davies while on national team duty last March kicked off an ugly dispute between Davies' agent, Bayern, and Canada Soccer, with accusations that Davies had felt pressured to start the game by the coach. While the issue was soon smoothed over with some marsh diplomacy, the injury ruled Davies out until December of 2025, almost 9 months, during which Davies missed 37 matches for Bayern. Since then, he suffered a torn muscle fiber in his right hamstring in February during a clash with Frankfurt before a right hamstring strain in March, which saw him absent for another 5 club games and kept him from joining the national team's final pre-World Cup camp in Toronto. Injuries have blighted the second year of Marsh's tenure at the helm of the national team and cast a significant shadow over the lead-in to the first men's World Cup to visit Canadian shores. Canada has been hit particularly hard in defense. In the extended absence of the national team captain, Toronto FC's Richie Laryea has been a standout replacement for Davies on the left side of Marsh's backline. However, the veteran Laryea is himself currently convalescing from a thigh injury suffered in early April, which was expected to rule him out for 4 to 6 weeks. This fresh injury will also be a personal blow to Davies, who, given Munich's elimination from the Champions League, was poised to make a triumphant homecoming to Edmonton in Canada's first World Cup warm-up clash at Commonwealth Stadium, where the national team faces Uzbekistan on June 1st. The sentimentality of that date now pales in comparison to the potentially huge blow of Davies missing out on the Group B opener against the Bosnians, and whatever follows. 4 years ago in Qatar, when the Canadian men made their return to a World Cup for the first time in almost 40 years, it was Davies who scored the country's historic first tournament goal. While Marsh has a host of other vocal leaders littered throughout his squad, and while many different iterations of makeshift backlines have performed manfully in impressive defensive performances over the past year, not having Davies lead out the country at BMO Field on June 12th would be a massive blow. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Toronto Star on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next story comes from the world of food and drink, and the headline is Where the Chef of George Restaurant Eats in Toronto, from underrated pizza to a standout brisket sandwich. And this comes from Bryony Smith, culture and lifestyle reporter. Executive chef Lorenzo Loseto has a bold claim. Our tasting menu at George Restaurant is the most unique in the city. And he has some pretty strong evidence to back it up. All George Restaurant tastings are custom designed based on guest allergies and restrictions, and each menu is designed so the 2 guests receive different dishes, paired with different wines, too. George Restaurant has also survived the ever-changing restaurant industry for more than 2 decades, earning Michelin recommendations along the way. While the tasting menu changes often, Lacedo is especially proud of some of the restaurant's signature dishes, including potato-wrapped tuna with white asparagus, beef tenderloin with green asparagus and potato pave, and lemon tart. We love giving things personal, seasonal, exciting, and responsible, he says. I'm excited, as I have always been, to work with the best products available to us and to work with a team of cooks who are driven and compassionate. So, where does Lacedo go when he wants to eat and drink the best of the best? We've got his go-to recommendations right here. His best date night spot is Giulietta at 972 College Street. You know everything will be great. No need to worry about what to order. Order anything and focus on the date. Their pizza is also underrated. The best bakery? Forno Cultura, various locations. They have the best cookies and biscotti. It reminds me of my childhood. And great bread and sandwiches, too. And a hidden gem, the Ace at 231A Roncesvalles Avenue. It's a great little spot on Roncesvalles. I love their small and unique menu. For a repeat reservation, Futura Granita and Gelato, 964 St. Clair Avenue West. They don't actually take reservations, but I do go there often for the great gelato. And when Granita season hits, no one does it better. And what was the last best thing you ate? It was at Bar Sugo at 1279 Bloor Street West. All their food is consistently great. I had the pizza the last time. Current obsession, Liliana, 1198 Queen Street West. I had dinner here and everything was so good. The pastas were a standout. Best place for a fancy dinner? Alo, 163 Spadina Avenue. They're the best in the city. I need to go back soon to check out the renovations and the new menu. For comfort food, try Black Camel at 4 Crescent Road. Get the beef brisket sandwich with chipotle mayo, cherimoya, fontina cheese, and caramelized onions. Pair that with a brio. And for the best dessert, Sonny's Chinese at 60 Kensington Avenue. Their Hong Kong French toast is the perfect dessert, interesting and not overly sweet. The black sesame paste makes it decadent, and it's also very unique for Toronto restaurants. His favorite lunch spot? Donna's at 827 Lansdowne Avenue. It's the perfect place, offering up simple but great food. The best late-night craving spot? Swatow Restaurant at 309 Spadina Avenue. Try Swatow for their noodles. And the best takeout? Elijah's Automatic Flame Broiled, 821 The address for Elijah's Automatic Flame Broiled is 821 the Queensway. Their burgers are outstanding. My favorite is the Golden State. The onion rings are delicious too. Favorite weekend brunch place? Pearl Harborfront at 207 Queens Quay West. I love their dim sum and always order a bunch of stuff to try. Standouts include the beef rice rolls and shrimp cakes. And my favorite coffee shop, Oakwood Espresso at 342 Oakwood Avenue. This iconic coffee shop is just such a unique place. I always order in code. I get the double might as well, essentially a stronger cappuccino because it has a bit less milk. And the best cocktail bar? Bar Pompette at 607 College Street. It's a special place with great cocktails and great people, almost always a classic Negroni. And finally, the place I'm dying to try, the Golden Horseshoe Barbecue, 657 DuPont Street. They just opened near me, and apparently it's one of the best barbecue spots. From what I heard, it's amazing. And finally, an article from our Life section with the headline, What Would Doug Do? How can I choose a Mother's Day gift she'll actually like? So your mom is always lukewarm about your Mother's Day presents. Here's how to go about choosing something she'll actually like. And this comes from Doug Wallace as a special to the Star. Shopping for a mom who is always lukewarm about presents is a common source of dread. You want to find something thoughtful that doesn't seem matronly or boring, but there are so many ways to get it wrong. Let's start with a few notes about what not to get. Obviously, nothing like the above-mentioned lukewarmly received presents or anything she already has. Stay away from gifts that seem like work, such as a portable vacuum or an air fryer. Don't buy clothing or jewelry unless you fully know her style or favorite designer or brand, or unless a sibling or friend with this type of expertise is also involved. Try very hard to not buy a gift certificate unless you're completely stumped. While helpful, they're just not very exciting. Think about perishable items you know she is fond of. Something indulgent and visually impressive like hand-painted chocolate truffles, French macarons, or a breakfast-in-bed food hamper with pastries, fruit, and jam. Can you get creative with an experiential present like a Nordic thermal spa treatment or a Spanish tapas cooking class? You could perhaps top up lessons she already takes part in, like ceramics, yoga, or language tutorials. Maybe it's something you can do together to give the gift of shared time, say a sushi making kit. A word of caution, don't get too woo-woo. I once gave my mother a handwriting analysis and she thought I was daft, and I'm not sure she ever followed through. Have you thought of simply asking for suggestions? There's really no harm in this. Ask if there's a gardening accoutrement she's been meaning to buy or something in her office that needs upgrading, or if she has a list of books she wants to read. If all of the above is failing you, just say it with a nice plant, a box of candy, and a big, big hug. Whatever you do, don't get a puppy. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 8th issue of the Toronto Star. Your reader has been Phil Tomczak. Thank you for listening.